welcome to my diary, an unedited, truthful account of my thoughts on life and living in my tiny little bus, the Prancing Pony. Thank you so much to my patrons for making content like this possible. I couldn't do it without you. Hello, my friends. Today I'm actually sitting somewhere I've never sat before in the woods. We are still parked in the circle of cedar trees, but I'm sitting just outside of it, mostly hidden from the road. It's a weekend today, and this is quite a popular spot for locals to come driving for fun, and I understand it. I've become quite fond of off-road driving myself, surprisingly. It just creates this sense of calm focus because you have to be so engaged all the time. You are sort of forced into the moment, and I really enjoy it. But the amount of passerby has left me feeling a bit anxious, as things are still a bit up in the air about stressors as of late, but they will hopefully be resolved today or tomorrow. Thank goodness. But I hid most of the day inside the bus, which was nice and needed, and I got a good ways into a new Skyrim file that I've started, and lots of cat snuggles and kitty cat love and tea and all sorts of things. Speaking of which, I've actually brought some outside with me, but seem to have misplaced my teacup. Where did you go? Oh, there you are. I'm drinking a cozy and very fun favorite of mine. This is from Geeky Teas called 11sies, inspired by 11 of the Stranger Things series. It is the only way I can describe it. It is a black breakfast tea that tastes like waffle crisp, particularly when you add milk and sugar to it. And I did sweeten this with maple syrup, so mayhaps I went a little hardcore in that direction. It's so good. I'm nursing the same brew from this morning already. So, I'm really enjoying this new little spot as I was setting up a couple of quails scuttled from the nearby bushes. They make me laugh every time I see them. The little feather perched high atop their head sort of bobbles with their waddly movement, and they like to travel together as presumably families, although I must admit I'm no expert on quail. But so if you see one, you will most likely see others in a line, bopping to and fro, scuttling across almost the same path. So that was a delight. I realized when I started this project, sort of as an idea, I quite like it. So I do believe I should summarize the last, 2.5 months of living in the bus. I was going through some of my notebooks and journals, and I have a pretty good timeline, I think, of what has actually happened. So I'll try to keep things sort of succinct, although I can't promise a funny story or something worth sharing won't crop up along the way. My fiance Jacob and I have been dreaming about living tiny for at least the last 6 years, probably more. Our first love, of course, was the classic Americana Airstream, the ultimate retro, vintage, lovely tin can, tiny living situation. Very popular campers, as they are timeless, they are classic, and I just adore them. I love the curves, and naturally, I started researching things in that direction, and Jacob fell in love with the idea too. Through that, and realizing because they are so timeless and classic, they are quite expensive. we unfortunately realized that wasn't going to be a path that I could take. And a good friend of mine actually had been doing some full-time travel in an Airstream, and towing something can be a bit tricky, especially if it's on the slightly larger side. And that's a whole other realm of travel, having to go slower on the highway, and you're worried about more wheels and etc., etc. Fortunately, through my deep dive, I discovered these magical little wonders called schoolies, or school bus conversions. And I fell in love. As soon as I went all in on the schoolie idea, we were so excited, and we knew we just needed to wait for the right time, save money, do some research, see what was around locally, and the opportunity fell into our laps. We found ourselves with enough money to go out and purchase a bus to renovate ourselves. It was sort of on the radar to maybe purchase a somewhat finished bus, but we were just kind of driven by the local market to see. Actually, we got approved by someone to purchase their already renovated bus. They were using it as a medical office, but the town that they were practicing in would not officially let them use their office to practice, even though it was a service to the community and definitely necessary considering the overcrowding of the hospitals that the doctor worked inside. So he decided to sell it. It was already torn apart and insulated. The walls were up, the floors were up. It had electrical wiring and even solar panels and batteries. And it was a great deal. But unfortunately, but ultimately fortunately for us, the town decided to have a change of heart to let him practice out of his bus conversion. Oh my goodness gracious, that's a big hawk. That's the third hawk that I've seen around here. Gosh, they're huge. I suppose that comes with the territory of recording outside, as things happen. So we lost that bus, which we were devastated at the time. It would have saved us a lot of time on our journey out, but it was a bigger bus, a much bigger bus than we have now. And it was very, very low to the ground. So it would have made the lifestyle we currently have, which is driving down dirt, bumpy, like creviced and rocky roads to get to different camping spots in the wild, it would have made it really, really difficult, if not impossible, not just because of the turn radius, but because we would have constantly been scraping the underbelly. So when that fell through, we continued our search and ultimately found a place that was selling shuttle buses. They usually fixed up the shuttle buses secondhand and then sold them to the local airport sort of shuttle traffics, nearby hotels or parking lot shuttles, that sort of thing. And they had recently opened up their market to non-commercial buyers, which was us, fortunately. I won't go into detail the headache that was dealing with all of the paperwork from the people we bought it from, but in short, we spent way too much money. We definitely were deceived quite a bit, and that resulted in a 9+ month battle with them just to try to get the title in our name, because they had quote unquote lost it. Ooh, you can imagine. And all of this, of course, during the pandemic, when you're not supposed to leave your house and quarantine was in strict effect, and it was just a real challenge. But finally, we made it out the other side, all the while building along in a little beautiful sanctuary only about 10 minutes from us in Los Angeles to build our bus. It was a really challenging process, and I'm not going to lie to you, the building process is still happening. It's not done, but then again, are these projects ever really done? Think of any house. There's always, whoop, you know, think of any house. There's always molding you want to change out and things you want to build or change or paint. Okay, motorcycle person. So, yeah, there's still quite a bit of work to do. And we ran into a lot of snags in the building process. Turns out there was a leak somewhere, even though I had looked at the vehicle history and everything, and it was supposed to be a Southern California car. It was a mall shuttle originally. Someone had left it in a rainy environment at some point, and there was a leak, and the top structure had been rusted a lot. And to our devastation, when we took down the original bus walls, there was mold growing all alongside a really crappy spray insulation job. There's no standard for removing spray foam insulation because it's such a new technology and people think, oh, once you put it in, you're not going to have to take it out. Well, my friends, let me tell you, the only way we could find to take it out, and it was toxic, mind you, we did have it tested. It was not black mold, but it was 3 other kinds of molds. And as I am allergic to lots of kinds of molds, Jacob donned a full body suit and respirator, gloves, foot covers, the whole thing, and little by little chipped away the mold-grown spray foam insulation with a crowbar and a hammer for 2 months. And that was a lot. You know, I realized I thought I was just going to summarize our travels for the last, I think I said 2.5 months of a summary, but I should note that we actually purchased the bus in October of 2019. So I actually went back quite a bit farther than I anticipated. But anywho, with that first big challenge out of the way, encountering plenty more along the way, we had been building for a bit over a year, and things were tough. Unemployment, because businesses were closed, and we weren't able to have the help that we hoped we would get because people weren't allowed to go be with each other. And rightfully so. I'm not complaining as far as that, mind you, because the safety of myself and my friends and colleagues was way more important to me than getting help, trying to build a wall. But it did make things a lot harder and a lot slower going. And we were nearing a fairly good point. The walls, the ceilings, the floors were all done. Cabinetry was being built and installed. Couches. And we found out we had to leave our build site in Los Angeles due to complications that had nothing to do with us that I won't go in here. But it was really difficult because we were struggling to make rent, as we always have. And we had this mostly finished bus, but it was not quite yet livable. Especially considering we have 2 beautiful, wonderful cat baby boys that we don't want to do construction around for their safety. I love them, but they eat a lot of things they're not supposed to. So we decided our plans to travel started a little early. We ended up on a ranch way out in the middle of the mountains in the country, not terribly far from where we were, and worked for 2 months to make the bus livable. So this brings us to the 2.5 month-ish mark I was talking about. I know that was a lot of backstory, but I think parts of the journey are worth mentioning, especially if anyone has questions or is thinking about getting into it themselves. Although it is worth noting that everyone has a completely different path into whatever lifestyle they're doing, be it building out a bus, living tiny, or even getting a master's degree. Everybody's journey is uniquely their own, and it's good to remember that. So we left the ranch out in the middle of the country. We had some practice living off-grid as we stayed in a trailer run on solar power while we were building, and that was quite helpful. It did take a little getting used to, but I quite enjoyed it, and it was a nice confirmation that I was on the right path. We ran into multiple pickles right out of the gate. And I have heard from others that the first year tends to be quite difficult. And woo, they're not kidding. They're not kidding at all. We ended up getting caught in 2 heat waves right out of the gate, where temperatures reached over 100 degrees. And when you're living in a metal box, it can be quite scary. Things are very, very well insulated, of course, but it is still a box made of metal with lots of windows, and we don't have anything but a fan to pull in or push out air through windows. So that was really scary. Fortunately, we have a beautiful friend who wasn't too far the first time we got caught in the heat wave, and we had the beautiful respite of her 70-degree driveway. Oh my goodness gracious. Because at that point, it's not just a hazard for myself and my fiance, but it's a big hazard for our cats, especially our little tuxedo, black and white, 4 socks, full mask, Pippin boy. He is so soft in a way that I've never experienced softness before on a cat. And it's because he has very fine fur, but so much of it. So he has quite a bit of trouble regulating his body temperature when it gets too hot. Living under those conditions, being concerned about all of the things and living things that you care most about in this world, and being in that kind of emergency mode is really difficult. We thought we escaped the heat wave the first time. We had to make a journey, round trip about 4,000 miles, sort of last minute, but worth it to visit some family, which had us traveling from the southernmost tip of California to the northernmost tip of California, even looping through Oregon on the way up. We got caught in another heat wave on that trip in 2 different locations. Once on a mountaintop, we managed to go down from the mountain, escape into a place nearby a bay for the following night, but when we were off again, we found ourselves stuck in the middle of 108 degree Fahrenheit heat again. This was during the big heat wave of the heat bubble, I think it was called, that hovered above Canada and affected a lot of parts of the Pacific Northwest, as well as the west coast of Canada as well. Conditions were sweltering and really, really dangerous, especially since the heat was in places that don't normally experience it. At least in a place like Southern California, where I've lived for the last 8.5, almost 9 years. People are prepared for the heat. Most places have air conditioning. There are lots of places that you can go near to the ocean that cool down significantly. But finally, after a lot more stress and our first big road trip, we made it to about less than a half an hour south of the Oregon border in California. And it was one of the only places in the country at the time that was not feeling the effects of the heat wave. Thank goodness. So we had about 5, maybe 6 days of just redwood forest bliss. It was incredible. I have never been taken aback like I was just to meet like 4,000-year-old trees and ferns everywhere. I was looking around as if half expecting to see a dinosaur pop out of a bush. Trying to take lots of pictures and video to capture our moments, and it was really lovely. And it was really, really good to see family. But we had another sort of let's build the bus reservation, and we had a timeline to meet, a deadline to make. I would have stayed a lot longer in Northern California and Oregon if I could have. But we had to head back from again the northernmost part of California all the way back to San Diego to pick up all of our tools that we had stashed away in a big storage unit, to drive back up to about the area we are now, to a little cottage that we had rented for the month, so we could get the cats out of the bus and finish a lot of the work we wanted to without having to worry about them being around sawdust or mortar or lots of other stuff. And in that, we were very successful. We got a lot done, and thank goodness for that. And even though we've run along into some hiccups at the end of our situation, overall, it was really nice. It was the first time we had been on grid in about 3 months, since living on the ranch in the middle of nowhere to living in the bus for 6 weeks. Our trial run in the bus was very successful, as I've mentioned in the previous entry. Oh my goodness gracious, I think I see like a deer jawbone. There's a jawbone of some kind of animal, just like a piece of it chilling right there. Well then, surprise! Oh, goodness me. If this ever ends up into words one day, it's going to be quite a journey. Not necessarily linear, but an adventure nonetheless. Goodness gracious. Uh-oh. Excuse me. So, we knew what we had to change based on our 6 weeks in the bus, and we were able to take a hot shower for the first time in a long time with amazing water pressure and seemingly endless water and ways to heat it for the first time in a really long time. And it was really nice. I'm not gonna lie. Although I bashfully admit I love showering outside. There's something about just being in your birthday suit, letting the sunshine dry off your body. It's amazing and I love it. But I'm a little concerned about privacy. So I'll have to pick a good spot that's not at all visible from the road around here, seeing as it is a surprisingly busy area. So, what happened after our month-long building adventure part 2? Well, fortunately for us, we are way, way, way up in elevation. Like, even as far as the United States is concerned, we are so high. Thousands upon thousands of feet up in the air. And the weather is amazing. I sort of feel like I'm cheating summer. I'm not that far from places that I need to be for mail and other duties and whatnot. However, the climate is completely different, and it's really magical. I wish I had known a place like this wasn't too far from Los Angeles when I was living there, because it would have just been incredible to take a weekend or several days to come up here and just relax and camp for free. So we set out on Monday. It's Saturday now, and it's been quite a stressful week but quite a wonderful one too. There's this interesting dichotomy. When I have to drive in to a nearby town, which granted the towns nearby are quite small. Since we don't have service at this location, we're still struggling a bit with our internet and figuring that out. So I take little trips almost daily to just access the internet for a little bit. And the contrast between the forest among the cedars, the fir trees, the quails, and the hawks. I feel like places just try to suck you back into it. I finally have this sense of peace and general state of calm that when I'm thrust back into certain aspects of society, I find myself worrying about old things that I used to, like money or needing to adhere to a strict time schedule that I have to get this, and this done by this time, or this will happen, and even the pressure of, hey, look at this, there's pizza, don't you want some? Or, hey, look at this is on sale, don't you want some? Don't you need this? Why wouldn't you want this thing? And it's just like, it's almost hard to believe both worlds can exist simultaneously. It feels impossible sometimes. But goodness me, is it refreshing once back and experiencing those sorts of things to come back here, take a deep breath, and just be. There's a distinct difference between trying to be happy, which really, we don't have a lot of control over our emotions. The way we react to things is the way we react to things. And trying not to beat myself up about that. But the way we act about things, now that's something that I have control over. But the act of just being, just not trying to be happy or be joyful, but just to be, plain and simple. I feel like you don't see that on a ton of little inspirational Instagram quotes, but I feel like more people need to know about this. Stop putting all the pressure on yourself to be something. You can just be and lovingly exist in whoever you are and whatever you're doing. It can be easy to lose that when I'm trying to navigate between hardware stores 100 miles away to try to get supplies and make sure I can get my medicine, and it's a 2-hour wait just to get some medicine transferred, and it's a lot. And now it's like, well, again, reacting to things is normal, but how can I change my action to better manage those things sort of in the moment? So, I'm sure that will be an ever-occurring journey of things. So stay tuned for more developments and thoughts and successes and failures on that front. I feel like I could talk for ages, but I do believe this chapter has been long enough. So that's a brief look into our off-grid tiny living adventure so far. And I am going to continue sipping my tea, admiring the nearby chickadees and pileated woodpeckers and very silly quails that I just love so much. And I look forward to what tomorrow brings.